At my ex's wedding, his bride's cruel toast shamed me. A waitress stepped up, revealed a secret, and turned their laughter into stunned silence. I was sitting at the back of the ballroom when the bride raised her champagne glass and said, "I saved him from that broken woman." People laughed. They actually laughed. Some clinked glasses. Others nodded, smiling like she had just delivered the punchline of the night. I could feel my face flush, not from shame, but from the heat of every buried memory rising to the surface. My stomach turned, but I stayed seated. I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. Then, through the glitter and noise, a waitress stepped forward. She moved slowly, like she was walking through water. She reached the center of the room, right by the head table, and without saying a word, she took off her cap, held it in her hand, and looked directly at the bride. "I'm his daughter," she said, "and I have something to say." The laughter stopped. The bride's face dropped, drained of all color. Her mouth stayed open, but no words came out. Just silence. Pure, sharp silence. And that's when everything changed. You ever get that gut feeling that you shouldn't be somewhere? That tight pull in your chest that says, "Turn around." That was me, sitting in my car outside the Ridgewood Grand Hotel, clutching an ivory invitation with gold trim and shaking hands. It came in the mail a month ago, no return address, just my name, Nora Bennett, written in neat calligraphy I didn't recognize. I almost threw it away. Who sends an ex-fiancé's wedding invite to the woman he left behind? At first, I thought it was a mistake. Then I thought maybe it was some weird olive branch or a test. But the truth, deep down, I knew what it was, an announcement, a warning, a way to make sure I knew that Ethan Cole, the man I spent 6 years building a life with, was officially erasing me. I hadn't seen him in 3 years. Not since he left our apartment in the middle of the night after I lost the baby. He didn't even look back, just said he couldn't live in sadness anymore, packed a duffel bag, left a note, and vanished. But it wasn't just me he left, it was her, too. Mia, his daughter, from a woman who walked out years before we met. She was 5 when she came to live with us. From the second she held my hand and called me mommy, I stopped being just someone who loved Ethan. I became someone who belonged to her. And when Ethan left, Mia stayed, not by accident, by choice. For months, I was a shell. Waking up felt like dragging myself through cement. The silence in our home was unbearable. Every photo, every song, every corner of the apartment held echoes of a family that barely got a chance to exist. There were days I couldn't even pick up the phone. I stopped answering friends. I stopped looking in mirrors. But I still packed Mia's lunch. I still braided her hair. I still helped her study for spelling tests while trying not to let her see me cry. One night, I was sitting on the bathroom floor, shaking after yet another call from a debt collector, when Mia knocked on the door. She was 10, barely up to my ribs. She pushed the door open, sat down next to me, and handed me a peanut butter sandwich. "You forgot to eat," she said. I think that was the moment I realized I wasn't alone. And if she wasn't giving up on me, I couldn't give up on myself. It took 2 years of therapy, odd jobs, and nights reading self-help books just to feel human again. But slowly, I found pieces of myself I'd forgotten I had. I started designing again, websites, logos, anything I could get freelance. I moved us into a smaller place, closer to Mia's school. I even laughed again, real belly laughs, the kind you feel in your ribs. They were rare, but they came. When the invitation arrived, I left it on the kitchen table for days. Mia was the one who finally picked it up and read it out loud. Her voice didn't shake. "You should go," she said. "Not for him, for you." "For what?" I asked, exhausted. "So I can watch him start a new life with someone prettier, richer?" "No," she said, "so he sees what he lost." I looked at her, 16 now, wise beyond anything I'd ever been at her age. And suddenly, I realized she wasn't just talking about Ethan. She was talking about me. That I was still treating myself like the broken version he left, but she saw someone stronger. So I said yes. Uncle Tom, who helped raise me after my mom passed, agreed to drive us. He never liked Ethan, said his smile came too easily and his eyes stayed too still. I asked him to sit in the back row with me. I didn't want to be seen, just there, just visible. I didn't know what I was walking into. I expected awkwardness, maybe a few whispers. What I didn't expect was a setup, a staged humiliation, dressed in white lace and gold chandeliers. But I'll get to that, because before the microphone was picked up, before the glasses were raised and the lies poured out like champagne, I stood in that ballroom, looked at the man I used to love, and realized something I hadn't said out loud until that day. He didn't break me. He abandoned the pieces, and I put myself back together without him. The wedding was everything you'd expect from someone desperate to prove their life was perfect. Crystal chandeliers hung like glass teardrops from the vaulted ceiling, the aisle lined with imported white orchids, every napkin monogrammed, even the string quartet playing with a kind of smug precision. That I stood in the doorway longer than I should have, trying to keep my breathing even. Mia had already disappeared into the kitchen to report for her shift. She'd taken a job with the catering service, swearing it had nothing to do with wanting to keep an eye on me, but I knew better. She wasn't just there to serve canapes. She was there to protect me in the quiet, fierce way she always had. I spotted Uncle Tom near the back, already seated. He gave me a short nod that said, "You're doing fine, even if it feels like hell." I slipped into the seat beside him, folded my hands in my lap, and tried not to look toward the altar, but I saw him. Ethan. He looked almost exactly the same, broad shoulders, that stupid, practiced half-smile. He was shaking hands with someone holding a whiskey in the other. If you didn't know him, you'd think he was warm, magnetic. But I knew the quiet distance behind that smile, the way he used charm like armor. I knew what he looked like the night he left, shallow eyes and silence, not a single glance backward. Then I saw her, Chloe Harper, all white silk and gleaming blonde hair, laughter that was just a little too loud, a little too pointed. She leaned into Ethan like she was posing for a magazine cover. Every movement seemed choreographed to say, "Look at what I have. Look at what she never could be." They exchanged vows in front of a giant floral arch. Ethan's voice didn't waver once. I kept my head down, chewing the inside of my cheek just to stay grounded. The crowd applauded as they kissed. Chloe turned toward the guests, beaming like she'd just won something. Then the reception began. Glasses clinked, waiters flowed like clockwork through the crowd. People laughed, gossiped, admired each other's dresses. I sat quietly, sipping water, forcing myself to stay present. Mia passed by once with a tray of bruschetta. Our eyes met for a brief second, and she winked. "You okay?" Uncle Tom whispered. "Still breathing," I said. Then came the toasts: best man, maid of honor, a cousin, all the usual stories about how Ethan was a great guy, how Chloe had turned him into a better man. I almost managed to tune it out until I heard her voice. "I want to say something." It was Chloe, standing at the head table, holding a flute of champagne. Her eyes sparkled in the lights, but there was something sharper behind them. She didn't look at Ethan. She looked at the crowd, and then at me. When I met Ethan, he was a good man, but he was hurt, damaged by someone who didn't know how to love him right, a woman who was too broken to see how lucky she was. I froze, my skin flushed hot and cold at the same time. The words hit me like a slap in a silent room. "She almost ruined him," Chloe continued, with a laugh so light it made my stomach churn. "But I saved him. I healed him. And today, he's finally where he belongs." Laughter followed, real laughter. People toasted. Glasses clinked, a few even clapped. Uncle Tom muttered something under his breath. I couldn't move. Every part of me screamed to stand up, to speak, to scream even. But I didn't. I just stared at her. This woman who knew nothing about the nights I held Ethan's hand while he cried about losing custody of Mia, nothing about the mornings I woke up early to write cover letters for his job search, nothing about the ultrasound photo I buried in the back of my drawer, the one I never got to frame. She didn't save him. She just arrived after he'd already run. And that's when I noticed the movement near the kitchen. One of the waitresses had stopped walking. She was staring directly at Chloe, her jaw tight, fists clenched. It was Mia. She stepped forward, shaking but steady, and began to walk past the tables, past the clinking glasses, straight toward the mic. I watched her shoulders rise and fall. Then she took off her server's cap, held it in her hand, and said in a voice louder than I'd ever heard from her, "I'm his daughter, and I have something to say." The room fell dead silent, and I knew in that moment the night was far from over. "I'm his daughter, and I have something to say." Mia's voice cut through the room like glass on polished marble. Every champagne flute froze midair. Every conversation stopped mid-sentence. The silence was thick, confused, electric. People turned in their chairs. Some whispered. Chloe's smile twitched, her hand still frozen around her glass. Ethan turned slowly in his seat, staring at the girl in the black apron and white button-up shirt who had just unmasked every lie he'd built this night upon. Mia stood beside the dance floor, her cap clutched tightly in her hands, her curls falling loose from her bun. Her chest rose and fell, as if each breath had to be pulled from somewhere deeper. "She's not just the woman you're mocking," she said, her voice cracking at the edges. "She's the woman who raised me." Chloe blinked, confused. "Wait, what?" "I'm Ethan's daughter," Mia said again. "From before he met you, from before he ran away, from before he pretended we didn't exist." The air changed. A few people gasped. I saw one of Ethan's cousins slowly lower his phone, like he wasn't sure if he should keep filming. Mia took a step forward. She wasn't reading from a speech. This wasn't planned, but it was truth, and it had weight. "He left when I was 11. Not just my mom, he left me. Didn't call, didn't write, just disappeared. And you want to call her broken?" Her eyes flicked to Chloe, who looked suddenly very unsure of her footing. I watched her work 2 jobs, so I could have food. I watched her cry in silence, so I wouldn't hear. And when people asked me where my father was, I said he was away on business because I didn't want anyone to know he chose not to love us. Someone near the front covered their mouth. A waiter stopped walking, tray hovering midair. Ethan finally spoke, his voice low, cautious. Mia, not here. Oh, now you remember my name? Mia snapped, stepping closer. When I sent you birthday cards, they came back unopened. When I emailed you to say I missed you, you didn't reply. You didn't even block me. You just ignored me. And now you're standing here, letting this woman talk about my mom like she's trash. He looked at me then, and for the first time, his expression cracked. I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel revenge. I felt clarity. I wasn't the one who should be ashamed. She didn't break you, Mia continued, her voice shaking but rising. You broke yourself, and then you tried to bury us like we didn't exist. Chloe looked around, eyes darting for support, but found none. She turned back to Ethan. Is this true? He didn't answer. He just stared at his daughter, like a stranger had walked in wearing his last chance. Mia walked toward me. Every step she took felt like a thunderclap in my chest. She reached for my hand. I stood, my fingers wrapped around hers, and in that small gesture, something inside me that had been dormant began to stir. Not rage, not bitterness, power. She didn't come here to fight, Mia said, turning back toward the crowd. She came here because I told her to, because I wanted her to see that she doesn't need to hide anymore. Then she looked straight at Chloe, calm, steady. She doesn't need to be invited into a room to belong in it. And no one gets to rewrite our story to make themselves look better. The room held its breath. Chloe's hand trembled around her champagne flute. This is crazy, she mumbled. She's trying to ruin my wedding. Mia raised her chin. You ruined it the second you built it on lies. Then she turned and walked away, pulling me with her. The crowd slowly parted. Whispers rose like smoke. No one stopped us. No one dared. Behind me, I heard Ethan call out once, Mia. But she didn't even turn. Outside, the air was cool and still. Mia exhaled hard, like she'd been holding in the truth her whole life. She looked up at me, teary-eyed but smiling. I wasn't going to let her humiliate you, she said. Not after everything. You didn't have to do that, I whispered. Yes, she said, I did. You saved me. It was time I returned the favor. And in that moment, I realized the strongest love stories aren't always romantic. Some are built in silence, in healing, in survival. Some are born the moment a child decides to protect the person who never stopped protecting them. We hadn't even made it halfway down the hallway when someone behind us called out, sharp and panicked. Wait! It was Chloe. She'd followed us out of the ballroom, dress trailing like a shredded veil of pride behind her. Her perfect curls bounced as she quickened her steps, but she didn't look perfect anymore. Her mascara had begun to smudge, her hands were shaking. For the first time that night, she looked real and scared. You can't just do that, Chloe snapped. You can't just hijack my wedding and humiliate us. Us, Mia said, eyebrows raised. I didn't say anything that wasn't true. You could have handled it privately, Chloe said. No, I said, stepping forward. You could have handled it privately, but instead, you stood in a room full of strangers and tried to turn me into a villain. Chloe blinked, her eyes darting between us, looking for some foothold she'd lost. I didn't know he had a daughter. I didn't know he did you ask? Mia interrupted. Or did you just believe the story that made you feel superior? Chloe opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Then Ethan appeared behind her, his jacket unbuttoned, tie hanging loose. His expression was different now, not cold, not composed, just exposed. Mia, he said, quieter this time, I never meant for this to happen. She turned to him slowly. Which part? Me being born? You abandoning me? Or watching someone else raise me while you vanished? He flinched. I thought I was protecting you, he mumbled. You thought disappearing was protection, Mia said. He looked at me then, the first direct eye contact since we'd arrived. I was broken, Nora, he said. You know I was. I was too, I answered, but I didn't leave. And there it was, the sentence that changed the air between us. Because no matter how many years had passed, no matter how many ways he tried to reframe it, he knew it was true. He ran, I stayed. I can't take it back, he said quietly. No, I said, you can't. Mia's voice broke the silence again. You know what I used to tell myself? That you were dead, that maybe something happened to you, and that's why you didn't come. Because the truth, that you were alive and just didn't care, was worse. Ethan's mouth opened, then closed again. He looked down at the floor, at his feet, at the trail of choices he'd tried to forget. And then something happened I didn't expect. Mia stepped forward. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She just looked him in the eye and said, I forgive you. He looked up, startled. Not for you, she said, for me, because carrying your absence has been exhausting. I'm done. He swallowed hard, nodding once, eyes glassy. You're incredible, you know that. She smiled, soft and sad. I know, she made me that way. She pointed to me, and that moment, that simple gesture, was louder than any mic drop. It was the truth laid bare, with no glitter, no wine, no forced smiles, just a daughter choosing her mother in front of the man who had left them both. Chloe stepped back, arms folded. So what now? You just walk away and pretend you didn't wreck the night? Mia tilted her head. You wrecked it the moment you tried to build it on lies. And I added, if you wanted a perfect story, you should have picked someone with nothing to hide. We walked past them, out into the night. The sky was wide and deep above us, clouds stretched like pulled cotton. It had started to drizzle, but none of us cared. The kind of storm we just weathered couldn't be measured in weather. Uncle Tom was waiting by the car. He looked at us, at Ethan still frozen in the entryway, and nodded slowly. Guess that's what you'd call a mic drop moment. Mia laughed, and I joined her. It wasn't bitter. It wasn't forced. It was real. In that moment, I felt light, not because anything had been fixed, not because Ethan finally understood what he lost, but because I knew who I was, and Mia knew who she was, and now so did everyone else. The next morning, the headlines started to spread, not in tabloids or newspapers, but in the way these things move now. Quiet clips on TikTok, grainy wedding footage posted anonymously, short videos titled, Waitress shuts down bride's insult with epic speech. I didn't watch them. I didn't need to. I had lived it. People messaged me, friends I hadn't heard from in years. Some apologized for losing touch when things fell apart. Others just said, you were so brave. But the funny thing is, I didn't feel brave. Not in the spotlight, not when Chloe mocked me, and not even when Mia stood up and told the truth. I felt like someone who had finally stopped trying to disappear. Ethan never followed up. No phone call, no apology, no last-ditch effort to explain himself. I think he knew there was nothing left to explain. His story was written in the silence that followed his absence, and we were done reading it. Chloe's name popped up in gossip circles for a week or two, enough to make it clear she'd become the punchline of her own party. I heard from someone at the venue that she left the reception early and never came back for the honeymoon send-off. Apparently, she moved out within the month. Whether they broke up or stayed together, I didn't care because this story was never really about them. It was about us, me and Mia, and what we became when the people who were supposed to protect us left. After that night, something shifted in our home. Quiet, but powerful. Mia was different, stronger. She walked taller. She didn't apologize for taking up space. I caught her practicing her speech in the mirror one night, not out of vanity, but preparation. She told me she was thinking about starting a podcast for girls who think they don't have a voice, she said. And me, I started something too. I'd always been afraid to talk publicly about what happened. There's shame in being left. People look at you like you're contagious, like your pain is a warning. But after the wedding, I realized something. I wasn't weak because I broke. I was strong because I rebuilt. So I started writing again, first just notes, then essays. I sent one to a parenting blog. It got published. The comments poured in, mothers, daughters, women I'd never met, all saying the same thing. Thank you for saying what I couldn't say out loud. That turned into a blog, then a small community group. A few months later, I registered a nonprofit, The Second Chance, a space for women healing from abandonment, divorce, emotional abuse. We host circles, provide counseling, help them write their stories, literally and figuratively. I didn't expect it to become what it did. I just wanted to offer women a space where silence wasn't the only option. But the most powerful part of all this wasn't the public closure. It was a quiet moment in our kitchen. One night in January, I was washing dishes. Mia sat at the counter, flipping through her notebook, legs swinging off the stool. She looked up at me and said, out of nowhere, I used to wish my real mom had stayed. My hands paused in the sink.
But now I get it, she said.
Maybe she left because I was supposed to end up with you. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I just turned around, dried my hands, and pulled her into a hug so tight, I think I breathed her in. Sometimes life doesn't give you the story you thought you wanted. Sometimes it tears pages out mid-chapter and leaves you to guess the ending. But sometimes when you fight, when you love hard, when you stay, you get something better. You get to write a new story. And the best part? You don't need anyone's permission to start.